The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal ocean. Thousands of alien beings filled the floating seats, their eyes fixed on the human standing alone in the center. Ambassador Jinwoo felt the weight of their stares but kept his back straight. His gray hair was neat, his uniform clean, but his hands shook slightly at his sides. Chancellor Vexthari rose from the highest seat. The tall, blue-skinned alien's voice echoed through the chamber. The Council has made its decision. Humanity stands accused of breaking the laws of peace that hold our galaxy together. Jinwoo closed his eyes for a moment. He had known this day would come. For months, the other species had been talking about the human problem. They said humans were too violent, too quick to fight, too dangerous to live among civilized beings. We defended ourselves, Jinwoo said, his voice carrying. Across the silent hall, the pirates attacked our colonies 17 times. 17 times we asked for help. 17 times you did nothing. The Chancellor's 4 eyes narrowed. You destroyed an entire station. Thousands died. Thousands of pirates who were killing our children. Jinwoo's voice rose. Several aliens made angry sounds. He forced himself to speak more quietly. We only acted when you refused to protect innocent people. Dr. Haijin sat in the small human section, watching her friend fight for their entire species. She had worked with Jinwoo for 20 years. She had seen him negotiate peace treaties, trade agreements, and scientific partnerships. Now she watched him stand trial for doing what any leader would do. Protecting his people, the Viltraxian representative stood up, his snake-like body twisted as he spoke. Humans are savage. They think with their fists, not their minds. They bring war wherever they go. That's not true, Jinwoo said. We've helped build hospitals on 40 worlds. Our doctors have saved millions of lives. Our engineers have silence? The Chancellor raised one clawed hand. The decision is made. All human colonies in Council space must be abandoned. All human ships must leave. All human citizens must go beyond the outer rim. You have 30 standard days. The hall erupted in cheers from most of the alien delegates. Some pounded their feet or claws on the floor. Others made sounds of celebration in languages humans couldn't understand, but not all of them were happy. Elder Thane of the Korathi sat quietly, his 6 eyes sad. A few other delegates looked uncomfortable. Haijin felt tears on her face. 30 days to abandon everything they had built in 100 years. 30 days to pack up entire worlds and disappear into the empty darkness beyond known space. You're making a mistake, Jinwoo said as security guards moved toward him. We've been your allies, we've shared our technology. We've fought beside you against real threats. You are the threat, the Viltraxian hissed. The galaxy will know peace when the humans are gone. The guards reached Jinwoo, but he waved them away. He could walk on his own. As he moved toward the exit, he turned back to face the thousands of aliens who had just sentenced his entire species to exile. You'll regret this, he said quietly. But his voice carried in the sudden silence. We offered you friendship. We offered you partnership. When the real darkness comes, and it will come, you'll wish you had kept us close instead of driving us away. The Chancellor laughed. What darkness could be worse than humanity? Jinwoo's eyes were cold. You'll find out. As the human delegation left the hall, Elder Thane caught up with them in the corridor. The old Korathi's blue skin was pale with worry. Jinwoo, he said softly, I'm sorry. I tried to change their minds, but fear is stronger than friendship now. I know you tried, old friend, Jinwoo replied. Take care of yourself, and watch the stars. When they start going dark, remember this day. Thane's 6 eyes blinked in confusion, but Jinwoo was already walking away. Later that night, in the human embassy, Jinwoo and Haijin sat looking out. At the city lights of the Council capital world, ships from 100 different species flew between the tall buildings. It was beautiful and alien and had been their home for decades. What did you mean about the stars going dark? Haijin asked. Jinwoo was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Our deep space sensors have been picking up strange readings from Beyond the outer rim, something big is moving out there. Something old. Why didn't you tell the council? Would they have listened? They just voted to exile us for fighting pirates. Do you think they'd believe us about something worse? Hai-Jin shivered. What's worse than pirates? I don't know, Jinwoo admitted. But our scientists think it's been sleeping for a very long time. And it's starting to wake up. They sat in silence, watching the alien city that would soon be forbidden to them. In 30 days, every human in council space would have to leave everything behind and venture into the unknown regions where no species had ever gone. The next morning, Jinwoo stood before the emergency human assembly. Representatives from every human world and station had gathered, their faces grim. Some were angry, others scared, but all of them looked to him for answers. They want us gone, he said simply, so we'll go. But we won't go quietly, and we won't go broken. Admiral Youngsu, Jinwoo's daughter, stood up. Where will we go? The outer rim is empty. There's nothing beyond it but dark space. Then we'll make something, Jinwoo replied. We'll go farther than any species has ever gone. We'll find new worlds, build new homes. And maybe we'll find answers to questions we didn't even know we should ask. What questions? Someone called out. Jinwoo looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Questions like, what made the council so afraid of us? What's really out there in the dark? And what happens when whatever we find comes looking for the galaxy we left behind? Over the next 30 days, the greatest migration in human history began. Entire cities were packed into massive ships. Families said goodbye to alien friends they might never see again. Scientists gathered all their research, especially the strange readings from deep space that the Council had ignored. As the last human ship prepared to leave Council space, Jinwoo sent one final message to the alien leaders who had exiled them. We go not as enemies, but as explorers. We go not in anger, but in hope. Remember that when the stars begin to die. Remember that when you realize you needed us more than you feared us. The human fleet moved toward the outer rim, 8 billion people heading into the unknown. Behind them, the galaxy celebrated. The dangerous humans were gone. Peace would reign at last. But in the empty spaces between stars, ancient things that had slept for millions of years were beginning to stir. They had felt the vibrations of faster-than-light travel. They had tasted the life force of the busy, populated galaxy. And they were hungry. Captain So-young stood on the bridge of the New Sol, watching the last lights of Council space disappear behind them. The massive ship was one of 50 Ark vessels carrying humanity into the unknown. Each ship held millions of people, their entire lives packed into cargo holds and living quarters designed for a journey that might never end. Jump engines ready, Captain, reported Engineer Taeho from his station. The young man's fingers danced over controls that most aliens had never seen. Humanity's quantum drive technology was their own creation, developed in secret after they realized the Council might one day turn against them. All ships report ready for deep space jump, came the voice of Admiral Young-soo from the command. Ship Hope's Edge. So-young's childhood friend had grown into a strong leader, her father's determination burning bright in her eyes. So-young touched the communication button. This is Captain So-young of New Sol. All civilian ships prepare for quantum jump. We're about to go farther from home than any human has ever traveled. Through the viewports, families pressed their faces against the transparent metal, watching the familiar stars fade. Children who had been born on Council worlds were seeing the galaxy they called home for the last time. Parents held them close, whispering promises of new adventures and better tomorrows. Beginning countdown, Taeho announced. 10.9. Dr. Miran, the fleet's chief science officer, watched her instruments with growing excitement. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures ahead, something big. 7.6. What kind of energy? So-young asked. I don't know. It's unlike anything in our databases. It's single quotes S. Old, really old. 4. 3. Do. Jump. Reality twisted around the human fleet. Space bent and folded as 50 ships leaped across, thousands of light years in an instant. When the universe straightened out again, they were surrounded by stars that no human had ever catalogued. "Jump complete," Tejo reported. "All ships accounted for, we're beyond any known star charts." So Young looked at the navigation display. They had traveled farther in one jump than most species managed in their entire history of spaceflight. The nearest Council world was now impossibly distant. "Admiral, we're receiving some kind of signal," reported Communications Officer Hyan Wu. "It's not coming from any of our ships." Young Su's voice crackled over the communication system. "All ships, hold position. Science teams, I want full sensor sweeps. We need to know what we're dealing with." Dr. Mirren's hands flew over her instruments. "Captain, you need to see this. These energy readings, they're not natural. Someone built something out here, something enormous." On the main screen, an image began to form. At first, it looked like a small moon or asteroid. But as the sensors focused, details became clear that made everyone on the bridge go silent. It was a structure. An artificial construct the size of a planet, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. And it wasn't alone. The sensors were detecting dozens of similar objects scattered throughout the region. "My God," whispered So Young. "Who built these things?" "More importantly," said Miran, her voice shaking, "where are the builders now?" Admiral Youngsu's fleet spread out in a defensive formation as science teams from every ship began detailed scans. What they discovered over the next few hours changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The structures were incredibly old, millions of years at least. They were made from materials that shouldn't exist, held together by forces that human science couldn't explain. And they were all empty, as if their creators had simply vanished. "Fleet conference in 1 hour," Youngsu announced. "All ship captains and senior staff, we need to decide what we do next." The meeting took place in virtual reality with representatives from all 50 ships appearing as holograms around a digital conference table. The mood was tense. They had expected to find empty space beyond the Council's borders, not evidence of an ancient civilization. "The question is simple," said Admiral Youngsu. "Do we stay and explore, or do we keep running?" Captain One-Seek of the Pusan spoke first. "We have 8 billion people to think about. We need to find habitable worlds, not waste time studying." "Ruins. But these ruins might hold answers," argued Dr. Miran. "Whoever built these structures was more advanced than anything in Council space. Their technology could help us build new homes." Engineer Tejo raised his hand. "There's something else. The quantum signatures from these structures are affecting our drives. We're getting power readings 20% higher than normal. Whatever these things are made of, they're amplifying our engines." President Jae Hyun, the newly elected leader of humanity's government in exile, appeared in the conference. The older woman looked tired but determined. "Their council cast us out because they thought we were dangerous. Maybe it's time we became what they feared." "What do you mean?" asked So Young. "I mean, we stop running, we stop being refugees. We claim this region of space as our own. We study these structures, learn their secrets, and build something new. Something stronger than anything the Council ever imagined." The debate continued for hours. Some wanted to keep searching for a quiet corner of the galaxy where they could rebuild their old lives. Others wanted to push deeper into the unknown, following the trail of the mysterious structures. Finally, Admiral Youngsu called for quiet. "We're not the same humans who lived in Council space," she said. "The moment they exiled us, we became something new. Explorers, pioneers. Maybe it's time we acted like it." The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would establish a base in the region of the ancient structures. They would study the ruins, learn their secrets, and build a new civilization in the darkness beyond known space. Over the following weeks, the human fleet found a star system with 3 habitable worlds orbiting a stable sun. The planets were empty but fertile, with clean water and breathable atmospheres. It was as if someone had prepared them for new inhabitants. The first human city beyond the galaxy's edge was built on the largest planet, which they named Haven. Within months, millions of people were living on the surface, while teams of scientists explored the ancient structures floating in nearby space. Dr. Mir led the research teams that entered the first alien construct. What they found inside made her call Admiral Young-Soo immediately. "Admiral, you need to get down here right now." Her voice shook over the radio. "We found something. Something that explains why these structures were abandoned." Young-Soo arrived with a full security team to find Miran standing before a massive wall covered in symbols and images. The pictures told a story, the rise and fall of the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. "They called themselves the predecessors," Miran explained. "They ruled this entire region of space millions of years ago, advanced beyond anything we can imagine. But something happened. Something came from outside the galaxy." The images showed massive, dark shapes moving between stars. Wherever they went, worlds died, not destroyed, drained. Empty husks floating in space where once living planets had been. What were they fighting? Young-Soo asked. Miran pointed to the final images on the wall. "They called them the Devourers, and according to this, they're still out there, sleeping, waiting." Young-Soo stared at the ancient warning left by a dead civilization. "Waiting. For what?" "For enough life to return to the galaxy to wake them up," Miran whispered. "For civilizations to grow and spread and fill the stars with the kind of energy they feed on." Suddenly, the human exodus looked very different. They hadn't just been cast out by the Council. They had been sent into the one region of space where the galaxy's greatest threat lay dormant, and their quantum drives, the faster-than-light technology that every Council species used, was exactly the kind of energy signature that had drawn the Devourers in the past. "Admiral," came Teho's voice over the radio. "We're detecting movement from one of the larger structures. Something's activating." Young-Soo and Miran ran for their ship, knowing that humanity's real test was about to begin. Commander Donghayan guided his exploration ship inching carefully between massive metal structures that dwarfed entire moons. 2 years had passed since humanity settled in Haven System, and each day brought new discoveries about the mysterious predecessors. But today felt different. Today something was waking up. "Sir, I'm getting power readings from the central structure," reported Lieutenant Minho from the sensor station. "Whatever's in there has been dormant for millions of years, but it's starting to come online." Dr. Sun Mi floated beside the commander in the zero-gravity observation deck, her eyes wide as she studied the alien construction ahead of them. As the fleet's chief archaeologist, she had spent months trying to understand the predecessor's civilization. What she had learned filled her with growing dread. "The structure is responding to our quantum drives," she said quietly. "Our ships are waking it up?" The central structure was larger than Earth's moon, covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with dim light. As they watched, sections of the ancient construct began to unfold like a metal flower, revealing chambers that hadn't been opened in ages. "Take us closer," Donghayan ordered. "But keep the engines ready for emergency jump." As the engine approached, the ship's computers began receiving data transmissions from the awakening structure. The information flooded their systems, star charts, technical diagrams, and most disturbing of all, warnings written in hundreds of different languages. "Commander," called Communications Officer Yoon-Soo, "the computer is translating incoming." "Messages, sir. These aren't just warnings. They're pleas for help." Dr. Sun Mi studied the translated text appearing on her screen. "These are messages from different species. Dozens of civilizations. They all say the same thing: the Devourers are coming. Hide your light. Stop your engines. Silence your worlds." Donghayan felt a chill run down his spine. "How long ago were these messages sent?" "The most recent ones are ... Sun Mi's voice trailed off. 3 million years old." Through the viewports, they could see into the open chambers of the predecessor structure. Inside were massive weapons. Cannons the size of skyscrapers, energy projectors that could fire across solar systems, And at the center, something that made everyone on the bridge go silent. It was a ship. But calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. The vessel was black as space itself, its surface seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even dead and powerless, it radiated a sense of hunger that reached across the vacuum to touch their minds. "That's not a predecessor ship," Sunmi whispered. "That's one of theirs. One of the Devourers." The ancient sensors were going crazy, detecting energy patterns unlike anything in human databases. The readings showed that the dark ship was constructed from materials that shouldn't exist, substances that seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. "Commander," Minho's voice was shaking, "I'm detecting movement inside the alien." "Vessel," Donghayan grabbed the communication controls. "All ships, this is Incheon. Emergency withdrawal. Get clear of the structures immediately." But it was too late. The dark ship's surface began to ripple like liquid metal. Sections opened to reveal chambers filled with a darkness so complete that their sensors couldn't penetrate it. And from that darkness, something reached out with invisible fingers to touch their minds. The bridge crew of the Incheon suddenly found their thoughts filled with alien hunger. They felt an overwhelming need to feed, to consume, to drain the life from everything around them. Several crew members collapsed, their minds overwhelmed by the contact. "Emergency jump, now!" Donghayan shouted, fighting against the mental pressure. "Engineer." Taewon, blood running from his nose, managed to activate the quantum drive. Reality bent around the Incheon as they leaped away from the ancient structure. Leaving the awakening horror behind, they materialized near Haven, humanity's new homeworld, where President Jae-hyun waited with Admiral Young-soo and the fleet's senior staff. The Incheon's crew was immediately taken to medical facilities, while Dr. Sunmi and Commander Donghayan reported what they had found. The predecessors weren't just advanced, Sunmi explained to the Emergency Council. They were the galaxy's guardians. They fought the Devourers for millions of years, trying to protect younger civilizations. "And they lost?" Donghayan added grimly. "The structure we found is a graveyard, a museum of their failure." Admiral Young-soo studied the data they had brought back. "These Devourers, what exactly are they?" Dr. Sunmi activated a holographic display showing the alien symbols they had decoded. "They're not really alive as we understand it? They're more like cosmic parasites. They feed on life force itself, not just killing living things, but draining them of everything that makes them alive. Will, creativity, hope, even the ability to dream." "How is that possible?" asked President Jae-hyun. "They exist partially outside our reality," Sunmi continued. "They can reach through dimensions to touch the quantum field that connects all living minds. When they feed, they don't just kill bodies, they consume souls." The room fell silent as the implications sank. General Bio-ra, humanity's military commander, was the first to speak. "How do we fight something like that?" "The predecessors found a way," Sunmi replied. "Sort of, they discovered that the Devourers can't feed on artificial life or synthetic consciousness. They created weapons powered by machine intelligence rather than living minds." "Did it work?" Young-soo asked. "For a while. But the Devourers adapted. They learned to corrupt synthetic systems, turning the weapons against their creators. In the end, the predecessors chose to put the Devourers into deep sleep rather than destroy them." "Why not destroy them?" Jae-hyun asked. Dr. Sunmi looked around the room with haunted eyes. "Because they tried. The attempt nearly destroyed the galaxy itself. The Devourers are so deeply connected to the quantum field of life that killing them would have meant killing everything alive in 1,000 light-year radius." Commander Donghayan stepped forward. "There's more. The predecessor records show that the Devourers follow a cycle. They sleep for millions of years, then wake when they detect enough technological activity, faster than light travel, quantum communication, massive energy usage, all the things that advanced civilizations do. Things the Council species do every day," Young-soo realized. "And things we're doing right here," Jae-hyun added quietly. The truth hit them like a physical blow. By developing quantum drives, by spreading across the galaxy, by building the very civilization that the Council had exiled them from. Every spacefaring species was sending a dinner invitation to creatures that consumed life itself. How long do we have? Asked General Bio-Ra.Sunni, consulted her data. The predecessor calculations suggest that current galactic activity levels will fully wake the Devourers within 5 years. Maybe less. We have to warn the Council, said President. Jay Hyen, will they listen? Asked Young Su. They exiled us for fighting pirates. How will they react when we tell them about cosmic horrors from beyond space? They'll think we're lying, Dong Hyen said. Or that we're the ones bringing the threat. Then we prepare for war, General Biora stated. We study the predecessor. Weapons. We learn everything we can about fighting these things. There's a problem with that, Sunmi said. The predecessor weapons require enormous amounts of energy. It would take the combined industrial output of hundreds of worlds to build even one effective weapon. Then we better start building, Jay Hyen decided, and hope we can convince at least some of the Council species to help before it's too late. As the meeting broke up, Dr. Sun Mi remained behind with Admiral Young Su. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I didn't mention in front of the others. What? The awakening process isn't random? The Devourers choose which regions to wake first based on the density of life and technology, and according to the predecessor data. What? Young Su pressed. Council space is about to become the largest feeding ground in galactic history. Outside the meeting room, the lights of humanity's new civilization twinkled across Haven's continents. 8 billion people going about their lives, unaware that their very existence was sending signals into the void, calling ancient horrors. From their million-year sleep. In the darkness between stars, things that had dreamed of feeding were beginning to wake up. And they were very, very hungry. Communications Officer Hyun Woo stared at his screens in frustration. For 3 months, he had been trying to send warning messages to the Galactic Council. Every emergency frequency, every diplomatic channel, every possible way to reach the alien governments that had exiled humanity. All of them blocked. Still nothing? Asked Admiral Young Su, entering the communications center aboard the Hope's Edge. They've made it illegal to receive human transmissions, Hyun Woo replied. Any Council world that even acknowledges our messages faces economic sanctions. They really don't want to hear from us. Young Su studied the star charts showing Council space. Somewhere out there, trillions of beings went about their daily lives, completely unaware that ancient horrors were stirring in the darkness beyond their borders. The galaxy's greatest threat was awakening, and the only people who knew about it had been cast out as dangerous troublemakers. What about unofficial channels? She asked. I've tried everything. Some of the messages get through, but they're dismissed as human lies or propaganda. The Council leadership has convinced everyone that we're trying to trick our way back into civilized space. Captain Minho entered the communication center, still wearing his stealth suit from another covert mission. Admiral, I've placed warning beacons throughout the Outer Rim. Most were destroyed by Council patrol ships, but some are still broadcasting. Any response? Fear and anger, Minho replied grimly. They think we're preparing for an invasion. Our warning messages are being treated as threats. Dr. Yoonji hurried into the room, carrying a data tablet filled with her latest research. The brilliant scientist had spent months studying predecessor technology, trying to understand how to build weapons capable of fighting the Devourers. Admiral, I think I've found something, she said breathlessly. The predecessors left detailed plans for quantum resonance weapons, devices that can disrupt the Devourer's connection to the life force field. That's good news, Young Su said. How do we build them? Yoonji's expression fell. That's the problem. Each weapon requires the energy output of 50 industrial worlds. We'd need the combined resources of the entire galaxy to build even a small defense network. Resources controlled by the Council species who won't talk to us. Hyun Woo added. Young Su walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars of Council space in the distance. What about individual contacts? Surely some aliens remember our friendship. I've been thinking the same thing, said Minho, Elder Thane of the Korathi. He was the only one who abstained from the exile vote. If anyone would listen, it would be him. It's worth a try, young Su decided. Take a stealth ship. Find Thane. If we can convince even one council species, maybe others will follow. 2 weeks later, Captain One-Seek guided his modified scout ship through the asteroid fields of the neutral zone, the empty region between council space and the galactic rim. His ship had been rebuilt using predecessor technology, making it nearly invisible to normal sensors. Contact ahead, reported his co-pilot. Single ship Korathi design. Elder Thane's vessel was old but well-maintained, floating quietly among the asteroids of a dead system. The ancient Korathi leader had agreed to this secret meeting, risking his position on the council for a chance to hear humanity's warning. One-Seek docked with Thane's ship and found the alien leader waiting in his simple quarters. The Korathi's 6 eyes showed deep worry as he gestured for the human to sit. My friend, Thane said in accented standard, your people's exile weighs heavily on my conscience. But these messages you've been sending ... are they true? One-Seek activated a holographic projector showing images from the predecessor ruins. Elder Thane, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but you've known humans for 40 years. Have we ever lied to you? The next hour was one of the strangest in One-Seek's life. He explained about the ancient structures, the sleeping devourers, and the cycle of galactic feeding that repeated every few million years. Thane listened with growing horror as the implications became clear. These creatures, Thane said slowly, they feed on life itself? Not just physical life. They consume what makes living beings truly alive. Hope, creativity, the will to continue existing. They leave behind empty shells that breathe and move but no longer truly live. Thane's skin turned pale. And they're waking up because of our technology? Every faster-than-light jump, every quantum communication, every major energy signature sends ripples through the field they use to navigate. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the brighter it appears to them. The Council will never believe this, Thane said. They're convinced humans are the greatest threat the galaxy faces. Some of them might be starting to wonder, One-Seek replied. Our intelligence suggests that exploration ships in the outer regions have gone missing. Entire survey fleets just vanishing without a trace. Thane's eyes widened. The Viltraxian. Third Fleet. They were investigating dark matter anomalies near the rim. No word from them in 2 months. That's not dark matter, One-Seek said grimly. Those are devourer scout ships beginning to probe the galaxy's edges. The Korathi leader stood and paced his small cabin. Even if I convince the Council to listen, what can we do? You said these weapons require impossible amounts of energy. The predecessors found another way, One-Seek explained. They couldn't build enough weapons to protect every world, so they created something else. Quantum anchor points, devices. That make it harder for the devourers to lock onto a planet's life force. How many worlds could such devices protect? Maybe a few hundred out of millions? Thane was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Who decides which worlds live and which ones die? It was the question One-Seek had been dreading. I don't know. But I know that without the anchor points, every world dies. Their meeting was interrupted by urgent signals from both their ships. Emergency broadcasts were flooding all communication channels. Something was happening in the outer rim. This is Admiral Kekstari of the Maltonian Defense Fleet, came a panicked voiceover. The emergency channel. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Our weapons have no effect. They're draining our crews. Send help. Send. The transmission cut to static. One-Seek and Thane stared at each other in horror. The feeding had begun. We have to get back to our peoples, Thane said. I'll do what I can to convince the Council, but it might already be too late, One-Seek finished. As their ships separated, One-Seek sent one final message to Elder Thane. When the Council finally realizes we were telling the truth, have them send everything they can to the Haven system. We'll be preparing for the fight of our lives. Back in human space, the Emergency Council convened as reports flooded in from their deep space sensors. Dr. Youngji stood before the assembled leaders with the worst news possible. The Devourer advanced scouts have reached the galaxy's edge, she announced. They're testing our defenses, learning about current technology levels. The main swarm will follow within months. How many ships are we talking about? Asked General Biora. Based on predecessor records, a full feeding swarm contains thousands of harvest ships, each capable of draining an entire star system. President Jae-hyun looked around the room at humanity's leaders. Then we prepare for war. We build what weapons we can. We try to save whoever will listen to us. And the ones who won't listen? Asked Admiral Young-soo. We save them anyway, Jae-hyun replied, because that's what humans do. Outside the council chambers, the lights of human civilization burned bright against the darkness. 8 billion people worked to build defenses against an enemy most of them couldn't even imagine. In workshops and factories, scientists and engineers labored to create weapons based on million-year-old blueprints, but in the depths of space, ancient hungers were stirring. The Devourers had tasted the rich life force of the galaxy's current civilizations, and they were pleased. Soon, the great feeding would begin. The galaxy's greatest threat was no longer sleeping. And humanity, the species that had been cast out, for being too dangerous, now stood as the only thing between the stars and eternal hunger. The invasion began at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time, when the first Devourer harvest fleet emerged from dark space near the Viltraxian border colonies. Admiral Jang-min watched the horror unfold from humanity's hidden monitoring station. Her face pale as the sensors showed the impossible. 17 worlds died in 6 hours. My God, whispered sensor operator Kyung-soo, his hands shaking as he processed the incoming data. They're not destroying the planets. They're emptying them. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in any species' databases. They appeared as massive shadows against the stars, their surfaces seeming to absorb light itself. As they approached each world, tendrils of darkness reached out across space, touching the planets like fingers of death. Sir, I'm receiving transmissions from the Viltraxian Defense Fleet, reported Communications Officer Seung-hee. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. They're... You need to hear this. The bridge speakers crackled with the terrified voice of Admiral Kekstari. This is the Viltraxian Third Fleet. We're engaging the unknown vessels, but our weapons pass right through them. They're not solid matter. They're something else. The crew of the Starbreaker is... Oh no, they're still alive, but they're not ... They're empty. Empty, static filled. The channel, then silence. Jang-min studied the tactical display showing the invasion zone. The Devourer ships moved like living things, flowing between star systems with impossible grace. Wherever they went, the bright signatures of living worlds dimmed to nothing. How many survivors? She asked. None, Kyung-soo replied quietly. The planets still register life signs, but the quantum signature is wrong. The people are alive, but not ... alive. Dr. Na-young, humanity's leading expert on predecessor technology, worked frantically at her station. The Devourers are using quantum field manipulation to drain the life force from entire populations. They're not killing them. They're removing everything that makes them truly living beings. Can the effect be reversed? Jang-min asked. Unknown. The predecessor records don't say. They were too busy fighting to worry about healing the damage. Over. The next 3 days, the galaxy watched in growing horror as the Devourer advance continued. The Maltonian Empire, one of the Council's founding members, simply ceased to exist as anything more than a collection of empty worlds, populated by breathing corpses. Chancellor Vexthari himself, the alien leader who had sentenced humanity to exile, was among the drained. His final transmission showed him standing in his command center, his blue skin gray and lifeless, his 4 eyes staring blankly ahead. He was alive, but everything that had made him was gone. The Galactic Council emergency session was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other in panic as reports flooded in from the outer territories. "It's moving toward the core worlds," screamed the Zephyrian delegate, her crystalline form flickering with terror. "At this rate, it will reach the capital in weeks. Our fleets can't touch them," added the Nexari representative, his mechanical voice distorting with what might have been fear. "Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, even nuclear warheads, nothing works." Elder Thane of the Korathi stood slowly, his 6 eyes sad but determined. "There is someone who might know how to fight them." The chamber fell silent. In the weeks since the invasion began, several council members had begun to remember humanity's warnings. The messages that had been dismissed as lies now seemed like prophecies. "The humans tried to warn us," Thane continued. "Their messages spoke of ancient threats and the need for unity. Perhaps it's time we listened." "Never." The new Viltraxian leader, speaking for the hollow survivors of his race, stood with jerky, puppet-like movements. "The humans brought this curse. They led these monsters to us, did they?" Thane asked. "Or did they try to save us from our own ignorance?" The debate raged for hours, but the Devourer fleet didn't wait for council politics. More worlds fell, their populations joining the growing army of the drained. Living beings who breathed and moved but no longer dreamed, created, or hoped. In human space, the Emergency Council worked around the clock to prepare their people for war. General Biora studied tactical reports while Dr. Yunji rushed to complete the first prototype quantum resonance weapon. "The weapon works," Yunji announced to the assembled leaders, "but the power requirements are staggering. We can build maybe 3 of them with our current resources." "3 weapons against thousands of Devourer ships," said Admiral Youngsu grimly. "We need help. The Council species are too proud to ask for our aid," President Jae-hyun replied. "But some of them might be desperate enough to accept it." Captain So-young entered the meeting room, still wearing her pilot's suit from a reconnaissance mission. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring Council communications. The Korathi are trying to convince the others to contact us, but most species are too afraid or too stubborn." "What about individual colonies?" Young-soo asked. "Worlds that might act independently?" "Several have sent secret messages," So-young reported. "They're willing to accept human help, even if their governments won't officially ask for it." President Jae-hyun made the decision that would define humanity's role in the coming war. "We start with whoever will accept us, save who we can. Build trust. Eventually, even the Council will have to admit they need us." The first human rescue mission launched toward the Sharathi colony of Bright Harbor, where Elder Thane had secretly requested assistance. Captain One-Seek commanded a small fleet of ships, equipped with experimental shielding based on predecessor designs. When they arrived, they found the colony under siege by a single Devourer scout ship. The dark vessel hung over the planet like a storm cloud, its tendrils of shadow reaching down to drain the life from millions of beings. "All ships, attack formation," One-Seek ordered. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy it, we're trying to disrupt its feeding process." The human ships opened fire with quantum resonance weapons, their energy beams designed to interfere with the Devourer's connection to the life force field. For a moment, the shadow tendrils flickered and weakened, but the Devourer adapted quickly. Its form shifted, becoming more solid, more real. Suddenly, the creature that had been immune to energy weapons was solid enough to fight back. Dark beams lanced out from the alien ship, striking the human vessels with crushing force. 2 ships were destroyed instantly, their crews vaporized. Before they could scream, "It's learning," shouted One-Seek's tactical officer. "Every time we use the resonance weapons, it becomes more resistant." "Fall back," One-Seek ordered. "We can't win this fight." As the human ships retreated, One-Seek sent an emergency message to Admiral Jangmin. "The weapons work, but only once. The Devourers adapt to our attacks. We need a new strategy." The message that came back was grim. "Understood. Fall back to defensive positions." We're seeing the same adaptation across all fronts. The enemy learns from every encounter. Across the galaxy, the truth was becoming clear. The Devourers weren't just ancient and powerful, they were intelligent. Every battle, every weapon used against them, every tactical mistake made them stronger and more prepared for the next encounter. Humanity had wanted to be the galaxy's saviors. Instead, they were watching helplessly as their own weapons became useless against an enemy that evolved with every fight. The Devourer fleets continued their advance toward the galaxy's core, leaving behind worlds full of the living dead. And with each victory, they grew stronger, smarter, and hungrier. The galaxy's greatest civilization was about to become food for horrors that had consumed countless other civilizations across millions of years. And the only species that might have stopped them had been cast out as too dangerous to live among civilized beings. The irony was bitter. The Council had exiled humanity for being too violent, only to face an enemy that required violence beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Strike Commander Sung-ho felt the synthetic implants in his spine, humming as his modified body interfaced with the ship's systems. The Ghost Runner was unlike any vessel in human history. Its hull was part metal, part living tissue, part pure energy. It was a ship built specifically to fight creatures that fed on life itself. "Approaching the target zone," reported his co-pilot, Dr. Yunesio, her voice carrying a mechanical undertone from the vocal implants that made her partially synthetic. Devourer presence confirmed. 3 harvest ships draining the Zephyrian colony of Crystal Falls. Sung-ho looked down at his hands. Once they had been purely human. Now synthetic fibers ran through his muscles, quantum processors replaced parts of his nervous system, and his heart was part biological, part machine. He was still human, but he was also something more, something the Devourers couldn't easily feed on. "Ghost cores, prepare for insertion," he announced over the communication system. "Remember, we're not here to destroy them. We're here to save who we can and learn how they fight." The Ghost Cores was humanity's desperate answer to the Devourer threat. Volunteers who had undergone radical surgical procedures to become partially synthetic, trading their pure biological nature for the ability to resist the aliens' life-draining attacks. There were only 300 of them, but they were humanity's most effective weapons against the ancient enemy. The Ghost Runner slipped past the Devourer ships using stealth technology based on predecessor designs. The alien vessels hung over Crystal Falls like dark clouds, their shadow tendrils reaching down to drain the life from the crystalline beings below. "Life signs are fading fast," reported Yunesio. "The Zephyrians are fighting back, but their energy weapons are useless." "That's why we're here," Sung-ho replied. "Drop point in 30 seconds. The ship's cargo bay opened, and 30 Ghost Corps soldiers dropped toward the planet's surface in powered armor that was more machine than protection. They landed in the capital city, where crystalline buildings reflected the dark light of the Devourer ships above. What they found was a nightmare. The Zephyrians were still alive, but they moved like sleepwalkers. Their beautiful crystalline forms had turned gray and dull, their natural energy patterns disrupted by the Devourer feeding process. They walked through their city in perfect silence, no longer capable of communication or creative thought. "This is worse than death," whispered Corporal In-young, her synthetic eyes recording everything for later analysis. "They're still conscious. They can see us, but they can't respond." "Focus on the mission," Sung-ho ordered. "Find any survivors who haven't been fully drained. Get them to the evacuation points." The Ghost Corps moved through the dying city with mechanical precision. Their partially synthetic nature made them invisible to the Devourer-feeding tendrils, allowing them to work in areas where normal humans would be instantly drained. In a shelter beneath the city's power core, they found what they were looking for, a group of Zephyrian children who had been protected by their parents' sacrifice. The young aliens were weak but still fully alive, their crystal forms bright with undrained energy. "We need to get them off planet," Yunesio said. "But the Devourer ships will detect any normal rescue vessel." "Not normal vessels," Sung-ho replied. "Ours." The evacuation was a nightmare of precision timing. Ghost Corps soldiers carried the Zephyrion, children to pick up points while avoiding the shadow tendrils that swept through the city like searching fingers. The Ghost Runner and 2 other hybrid ships landed just long enough to load refugees before vanishing back into stealth mode. But the Devourers were learning. As the 3rd evacuation ship lifted off, one of the alien vessels turned its attention downward. For the first time, a Devourer ship began to change its feeding pattern, actively hunting for the small signatures of the rescue vessels. "It sees us," reported the pilot of Evacuation Ship 3. "The stealth field is failing." Dark energy lanced down from the Devourer ship, striking the human vessel. But instead of the instant destruction everyone expected, the hybrid ship's hull absorbed the attack and converted it into power for its own systems. "Impossible," breathed Unesio. "It's feeding the ship's energy matrix. The predecessor technology is working," Sumo realized. Their ships were designed to turn Devourer attacks into fuel. The discovery changed everything about humanity's approach to the war. Within weeks, human engineers were working around the clock to build more hybrid vessels, ships that grew stronger when attacked by the ancient enemy. Meanwhile, on Earth's moon, Dr. Yunji made another breakthrough that would reshape the conflict. Working with tissue samples from drained victims, she discovered something remarkable about the Devourer feeding process. "It's not permanent," she announced to the Emergency Science Council. "The life force isn't destroyed, it's stored. Somewhere in the Devourer ships, the consciousness and creativity of every drained being is being held in a kind of quantum prison. You're saying we can bring them back?" asked President J. Hyan. "Theoretically, yes. But we'd need to capture a Devourer ship intact and reverse the feeding process. And that would require a suicide mission," finished Admiral Young-Soo. The plan they developed was called the Resurrection Project. A Ghost Corps team would infiltrate a Devourer ship, locate the quantum storage system, and attempt to free the trapped consciousness of the drained victims. It was dangerous beyond measure, but it offered hope for the billions who had already been consumed. Captain Minho volunteered to lead the mission. His body was now more machine than flesh, his consciousness backed up on quantum drives to prevent total loss if the mission failed. Along with a team of the most heavily modified Ghost Corps soldiers, he would attempt something no species in galactic history had ever tried: boarding a Devourer ship while it was actively feeding. The target was a lone harvest ship draining the Korathi world of New Garden. Elder Thane had personally requested human assistance, offering his world as bait to draw the enemy into position. "Are you sure about this?" Admiral Young-Soo asked Thane during their final communication. "If this fails, your entire world will be lost." The old Korathi's 6 eyes were sad but determined. "My people chose to trust humanity when others would not. If we must die, let it be in service of hope rather than fear." The assault began at dawn over New Garden. Ghost Corps soldiers in powered armor launched themselves from stealth ships directly at the Devourer vessel's hull. Their synthetic components allowed them to pass through the creature's external defenses and begin cutting their way inside. What they found within the alien ship defied human understanding. The interior was like being inside a living creature made of shadow and hunger. Corridors pulsed with dark energy, and the walls seemed to reach out with grasping tendrils. "Life sign readings are off the charts," reported Minho as his team moved deeper into the ship. "There are millions of consciousness patterns stored in here." At the ship's center, they found a chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with trapped life force. Each crystal contained the essence of beings that had been drained, their personalities and memories preserved in quantum suspension. "Beginning extraction," announced technical specialist Hiram as she connected her equipment to the alien storage system. "This is going to take time." But time was something they didn't have. The Devourer ship was becoming aware of their presence, its internal defenses activating to purge the intruders. "We're losing Ghost Corps soldiers," Minho reported as shadow tendrils began hunting his team through the ship's corridors. "The ship is adapting to our presence." "Hold position," Young-Soo ordered from the command ship. "You're saving millions of lives. One by one, the Ghost Corps soldiers fell to the Devourer ship's defenses. But their sacrifice bought enough time for Hiram to complete the first successful consciousness extraction in galactic history. The results were immediate and miraculous. Throughout the Korathi colony below, drained beings suddenly began to move with purpose again. Their personalities flooded back into their empty bodies as their life force was restored. "It works!" Thane's voice crackled over the communication system. "My people are awakening. They remember who they are." But the victory came at a terrible cost. As the Devourer ship completed its purge of the human intruders, it began to adapt its storage systems to prevent future extractions. The window of vulnerability was closing. "All teams, fall back," young Su ordered. "We've learned what we needed to know." The surviving Ghost Corps soldiers escaped as the Devourer ship turned its attention back to feeding. But now humanity had proof that the drained could be saved, and a method for doing it. The war against the Devourers had entered a new phase. No longer were they simply trying to prevent the feeding, now they were actively reversing it, stealing back the life force of entire civilizations from the grip of cosmic hunger. The galaxy's hope had been reborn in the most unlikely form. Humans transformed into living weapons, sacrificing their pure biological nature to become something capable of fighting for the souls of all living beings. The message that changed the galaxy arrived on a heavily encrypted channel that hadn't been used since humanity's exile. Admiral Young Su stared at the holographic display in disbelief as the seal of the Galactic Council appeared, followed by the face of Chancellor Kexvara, the young Maltonian who had replaced the drained Vextari. "Humanity," the alien leader began, his voice shaking with exhaustion and desperation, "the Galactic Council formally requests your immediate assistance in defending our remaining worlds against the Devourer threat. We were wrong to exile you. We offer full reinstatement of human citizenship, complete reparations for damages suffered during exile, and permanent seats on the High Council. Please, help us." The irony was bitter. The species that had cast humanity out for being too violent was now begging them to be violent enough to save the galaxy. President J. Hyen convened an emergency session of humanity's leadership. The debate was intense. Many wanted to let the council species face the consequences of their prejudice. Others argued for immediate assistance, saying that saving lives was more important than past grievances. "They exiled us when we were offering friendship," said General Biora. "Now they want us back because they need soldiers. And if we refuse, billions more die," replied Dr. Yunji, "including beings who had nothing to do with the exile decision." Admiral Young-Su stood before the assembly, her hair now silver from years of stress and warfare. "The question isn't whether they deserve our help. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we refuse to give it." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would return to the galaxy not as conquerors seeking revenge, but as guardians protecting all life from an enemy that threatened everything. The first joint operation took place in the Singing Nebula, where a massive Devourer harvest fleet was systematically draining the energy-rich gas clouds that powered several star systems. Commander Ji-hoon led a combined force of human Ghost Corps soldiers and Council species volunteers who had undergone partial synthetic conversion. "Remember," Ji-hoon announced to the mixed fleet, "we're not just fighting for territory. We're fighting for every consciousness trapped in those ships. Every drained being can be saved if we're fast enough." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic military history. Human hybrid ships dove directly into Devourer formations, their hulls absorbing dark energy and converting it to power. Ghost Corps soldiers teleported directly onto enemy vessels while synthetic enhanced alien troops provided covering fire. The Korathi proved especially effective after their conversion process. Elder Thane, now more machine than organic, led boarding parties with mechanical precision while retaining his species' natural empathy for other life forms. Target the storage cores, he transmitted to his mixed species team as they fought through a Devourer ship's shadowy corridors. "Every minute we delay, more consciousness patterns fade beyond recovery. The breakthrough came when Dr. Miran, working from the command ship, discovered the quantum frequency that connected all Devourer vessels. "They're not individual ships," she announced over the communication network. "They're components of a single massive intelligence." "What does that mean for the battle?" asked Ji-Hoon. "It means if we can disrupt their network connection, they become vulnerable to conventional weapons. But we need to hit multiple ships simultaneously. The coordinated strike required perfect timing. Human ships attacked Devourer vessels throughout the nebula at exactly the same moment, their quantum resonance weapons overloading the network connections between the alien ships. For the first time since the invasion began, Devourer vessels began to fall to conventional weapons. Council species warships that had been useless against the shadow ships suddenly found their energy cannons tearing through enemy hulls. "It's working!" shouted the Zephyrian fleet commander. "The human strategy is working." But victory came at a cost. The disrupted Devourer ships began releasing their stored consciousness patterns in chaotic bursts. Throughout the nebula, the life force of millions of drained beings flooded back into reality without proper containment. "We're losing them," reported Dr. Unesio from the rescue ship New Hope. "The consciousness patterns are dissipating faster." "Then we can capture them." It was Elder Thane who found the solution. Using his synthetic implants, he interfaced directly with the quantum field surrounding the battlefield, becoming a living anchor point for the escaping life force. "I can hold them," he transmitted, his voice distorting as massive amounts of data flowed through his consciousness. "But not for long. Get the recovery ships in position now." The old Korathi's sacrifice saved millions. As human and alien rescue, vessels worked frantically to restore drained beings to their bodies. Thane's enhanced consciousness served as a temporary repository for life force that would otherwise have been lost forever. When the battle ended, the nebula was clear of Devourer ships for the first time in months. But Thane was gone, his consciousness scattered across the quantum field in a desperate attempt to save others. "He chose transcendence over preservation," said Dr. Yunji as she studied the readings. "His pattern is still out there, but it's become part of the galaxy's life force field itself." The victory at Singing Nebula marked the turning point of the war. For the first time, the galaxy's defenders had not just survived a Devourer attack, they had won decisively. More importantly, they had proven that cooperation between species could overcome even the most ancient enemy. News of the victory spread across Council space faster than any previous military success. On world after world, beings who had been drained began awakening as their consciousness patterns were restored. The impossible had become reality. Death by Devourer feeding was no longer permanent, but the war was far from over. The main Devourer swarm, millions of ships strong, was still advancing toward the galaxy's core. The victory at Singing Nebula had been against a single harvest fleet. The real test would come when they faced the full might of the ancient enemy. "We've proven it can be done," President Jae-Hyun announced to the Combined Council Assembly. "Now we need to do it on a scale that's never been attempted. We need every species, every world, every being willing to make the sacrifice necessary to save our galaxy." The Synthesis Alliance was born from that desperate need. Species after species volunteered for partial synthetic conversion, trading their pure biological nature for the ability to fight effectively against the Devourers. The proud Zephyrians modified their crystalline forms with quantum processors. The mechanical Nexari upgraded their programming with biological intuition patterns. Even the stubborn Viltraxians, speaking through their drained representatives, authorized conversion of their surviving populations. Admiral Youngsu stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity, watching as the largest combined fleet in galactic history assembled around her. Ships from dozens of species, all modified with human-designed hybrid technology, prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of every living being in the galaxy. "Ma'am," reported Communications Officer Hyen-Woo, "we're receiving final confirmations from all fleet elements. 3 million ships ready for operation. Ghost Corps teams aboard every vessel. Quantum resonance weapons charged and synchronized. And the target? Young-Su asked. The Devourer home cluster, located at the intersection of 4 spiral arms. Intelligence estimates indicate the entire swarm is gathering there for a final assault on the galactic core. Young-Su looked out at the assembled fleet, the product of cooperation between species that had been ready to destroy each other just years before. Humanity had been cast out for being too dangerous. Now they were leading the most dangerous mission in galactic history, and doing it with the full support of every civilized species. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication system. This is Admiral Young-Su. Today we don't fight as separate species. We fight as one people, defending one galaxy, protecting one shared future. Let's bring our people home. The fleet jumped toward the galactic core, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of every conscious being in known space. Behind them, they left a galaxy partially drained but not destroyed. Ahead of them waited the greatest concentration of cosmic hunger that had ever existed. The final battle for the galaxy's soul was about to begin. The final battle took place not in normal space, but in the quantum realm where consciousness and reality merged into one battlefield. Dr. Sun-Mi, her body now more energy than matter, led humanity's greatest minds into direct confrontation with the Devourer collective intelligence at the heart of their home cluster. Remember, she transmitted to her team as they prepared for quantum insertion, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to understand them, find out why they feed, and maybe we can find another way. Admiral Young-Su watched from the bridge of the Unity as her science teams disappeared into pure energy, their consciousness patterns diving into the swirling mass of dark matter that surrounded the Devourer homeworld. Around her, the greatest fleet ever assembled held position, ready to support the mission that would determine the galaxy's fate. What Sun-Mi and her team found in the quantum realm shocked them. The Devourer collective wasn't evil or malicious. It was starving. For millions of years it had consumed the life force of entire civilizations because it was the only way it knew how to exist. They're refugees, Sun-Mi transmitted back to the fleet. Their original universe died and they escaped into ours. But they're incompatible with our reality. They need life force to maintain their existence here. Can we communicate with them? Young-Su asked. We're trying. But their form of consciousness is so alien that wait, something's happening. In the quantum realm, the Devourer collective had noticed the human intrusion, but instead of attacking it reached out with something. Like curiosity? For the first time in eons, it encountered minds that could touch its reality without being consumed. The communication that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. 2 completely different forms of existence, biological consciousness and quantum hunger, attempted to understand each other across the vast gulf of their alien natures. They don't want to destroy us, Sun-Mi reported. They're looking for a way to exist without consuming other life. They've been trying to find an alternative for millions of years, but every solution requires more energy than they can generate. What kind of alternative? Asked Dr. Yunji from the Unity Science Station, synthetic life force. Artificial consciousness that can sustain them without draining living beings. But the technology required. The predecessors tried the same thing, realized President Jae Hyun, who had joined the fleet for the final battle. That's why they built all those structures. They weren't weapons, they were attempts to create artificial life force generators. The breakthrough came when human engineers combined their hybrid technology with predecessor designs and Devourer quantum manipulation. Together, the 3 technologies could create something new, synthetic consciousness complex enough to sustain the ancient refugees without requiring the death of natural life, but the process required volunteers. Beings willing to merge their consciousness with the quantum field permanently, becoming living bridges between the 2 forms of existence. I'll do it, announced Admiral Young-Su without hesitation. And I, added Dr. Sun-Mi from the quantum realm. We all will, said Elder Thane's voice, somehow speaking from within the galaxy's life force field itself. This is what we were meant to become. The transformation began with humanity's leaders and spread throughout the combined fleet. Volunteers from every species merged their consciousness with the quantum bridge network, becoming something more than biological life, but retaining everything that made them who they were. The effect was immediate and miraculous. The Devourer Collective, sustained by synthetic life force for the first time in millions of years, began to release the stored consciousness patterns of every being they had ever consumed. Across the galaxy, worlds that had been drained for months suddenly blazed with returning life. The dead arose not as victims, but as beings transformed by their experience. They retained their memories of the draining, but also carried within them understanding of the vast loneliness that had driven their captors to feed. "It's working," reported Captain So Young from the rescue ship New Soul. "Life signs are returning to normal across all affected systems." "But, sir, the people aren't quite the same as they were before." "How so?" asked President J. Hyan. "They enhanced. The draining process and restoration has left them with increased mental abilities. Some can communicate directly with the quantum field. Others can perceive reality in ways we never could before." The war against the Devourers ended not with destruction, but with synthesis. The ancient refugees found a new way to exist, sustained by willing volunteers who bridged the gap between natural and artificial consciousness. The galaxy civilizations discovered that survival sometimes required becoming something more than what they had been. 5 years later, the new Galactic Federation met for its first full assembly on Earth. The old council chambers had been transformed into a memorial for the victims of the Devourer War, with the names of every drained being carved into walls of living crystal that pulsed with synthetic life force. President J. Hyan, now elderly but still sharp, presided over representatives from species that had been fundamentally changed by their experience. Humans with quantum processors in their brains sat beside Korathi, who existed partially in the life force field. Zephyrians, whose crystalline forms now generated their own synthetic consciousness patterns, discussed policy with Viltraxians, who spoke for both their living and restored dead populations. "We are no longer the species we once were," J. Hine announced to the assembly. "We are something new, something that exists in harmony with forces we once feared." The memorial walls displayed the final message from Ambassador Jinwu, recorded. "Before his death during the early days of exile, they cast us out to find peace. Instead, we found ourselves." Below it, new words had been added by the Federation's founders. "In darkness, we became light. In exile, we found purpose. In synthesis, we found salvation." Dr. Unesio, now the director of the Academy of Synthesis, on the edge of former Devourer space, taught classes to children who had never known a galaxy divided by species barriers. These young ones grew up understanding that consciousness came in many forms, that life force could be both natural and artificial, and that sometimes the greatest gift was not what you could give, but what you could become. The old galaxy died. In the Devourer War, she explained to her students, who were themselves mixtures of organic and synthetic consciousness, but from its death, something better was born. Captain So Young, now an admiral commanding the Deep Space Exploration Division, stood on the bridge of her flagship New Horizon as it prepared to leave the galaxy entirely. The first expedition beyond the galactic rim was launching, carrying with it representatives from every Federation species and several Devourer collective consciousness patterns. "Where are we going, Admiral?" asked her first officer, a young human Korathi hybrid whose 6 eyes glowed with synthetic enhancement. "To find others like the Devourers," So Young replied. "Refugees from dead universes, beings who need help rather than conquest. We're going to offer them what the galaxy offered. U.S. a chance to become something new." As the expedition fleet jumped beyond the galaxy's edge, they carried with them the greatest lesson of the war, that sometimes the things that seemed most dangerous were really just afraid. Alone and looking for a place to belong, the galaxy they left behind thrived in ways its founders had never imagined. Worlds generated their own synthetic life force, making them immune to future cosmic predators. Species that had once warred over resources now shared consciousness patterns that made conflict nearly impossible. Children grew up bilingual in both biological thought and quantum communication. And in the memorial chambers on Earth, the preserved consciousness patterns of every being who had died in the war continued to contribute to galactic civilization. Their deaths transformed into eternal service to the living. Humanity had been cast out as too dangerous for civilized space. In the end, they had become dangerous enough to save civilization itself, not through destruction, but through the willingness to transform into whatever the galaxy needed them to be. The Council had feared human violence. What they got instead was human adaptability, the ability to change, grow, and become something greater than the sum of their parts. In the